Former Argentinian President Macri plotted to intervene Venezuela in 2019 under the U.S. guidance, according to a report by the Argentinian journalist Horacio Verbitsky, published on Sunday in local media outlets. Russia-Belarus joint military drills partially concluded, according to Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. Israel's siege of Palestinians took another life. A Palestinian teenager was killed and 20 others were wounded by Israeli gunfire during a military operation by their occupying forces in the northern West Bank. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Peru, new Prime Minister Aníbal Torres ratified the accusation that a coup d'etat is underway that aims to remove President Pedro Castillo from the top post or pressure him to resign. Meanwhile, Torres pointed out that we'll respect the decision of the Congress on whether or not to grant the vote of confidence. He also indicated that he will seek to talk with all opposition forces in order to reduce the political confrontation in the country between the executive and the Congress. Likewise, the Peruvian Prime Minister announced that from Monday on, they will ask the Parliament to determine when the Cabinet will be able to go to the Parliament to request the vote of confidence.
You can see it in the capital. A few congressmen do not want to recognize the triumph of Pedro Castillo, which is also your triumph. They want to disown him, and every moment they claim vacancy. They want vacancy. They work day and night for vacancy. In other words, they are coup plotters, and yet they call themselves Democrats. We stand our hands to them. We don't want to continue arguing. Instead, we rather discuss the national problems, to solve people's problems which have been postponed for 200 years of Republican life. We want to put an end to discrimination, because all of us who live in this land called Peru, we are equal.
On Monday, China's President Xi Jinping and Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador exchanged congratulatory messages to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relationships between the two countries. In his message, Xi noted that both China and Mexico are countries with time-honored civilizations and history, and the friendly exchanges between their people date back to ancient times. Since China and Mexico established diplomatic relationships half a century ago, especially since they forged a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2013, bilateral relations have been developing on a fast track, said Xi, adding that the two countries enjoy ever-deepening political mutual trust and enhance friendly exchanges and cooperation in various areas. This Sunday, the Argentinian journalist Horacio Verbitsky published a report disclosing details of the participation of the Argentinian army in a multinational army military exercise led by the United States to intervene in Venezuela during the 2019 siege against the government of President Nicolás Maduro Moros.
Venezuela was the target of multifaceted international maneuver aimed at overthrowing the president. At the time, the hegemonic media narrative justified international intervention in the country by arguing a supposed humanitarian crisis, while at the same time positioning a parallel presidency, personified by the then opposition deputy, Juan Guaidó. Under the guidance of the United States, Argentina, with Mauricio Macri as president, has been part of the so-called Lima Group Peru since 2017, which support the thesis of a military intervention based on a controversial interpretation of the Democratic Charter. The climax of the crisis was the so-called Battle of the Bridges, a military operation that attempted to penetrate the western state of Táchira from Colombia in order to create a beachhead in Venezuela territory. Horacio Verbitsky's report revealed this Sunday that Macri's government deployed a large-scale military exercise to participate in the invasion, while publicly ignoring President Maduro in the framework of the political media operation led by the Lima Group. The so-called Puma exercise, led by Argentine General Juan Martín Paleo, commander of the Rapid Deployment Force, was carried out in 7 sections, with the participation of large contingents of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The plan envisaged the penetration of Argentinian troops into Venezuela via Colombia. The military plot against Venezuela involved the participation of forces from other nations and hoped for the United Nations resolution that would justify the action, which in the end was never issued. The objective of the multi-front operation, planned primarily by President Donald Trump, Mike Pompeo, and Elliot Abrams, was to provoke the surrender of the Venezuelan military forces and control power with a minimum cost. Yet throughout the siege, the Bolivarian armed forces remained loyal to the oath. During an appearance before the Ministry of Defense, General Paleo justified that the Puma exercise was aimed at planning the security of the G20 summit in Buenos Aires, a summit that took place on 3rd November and 1st December 2018, months before the exercises. With the exception of General Paleo himself, the Argentinian military commanders who took part in the Puma exercise were dismissed from service when the current president Alberto Fernandez came to power. New information shows the magnitude of the plan that was hatched against the Bolivarian nation, and consequently the size of the victory that the Venezuelan people, together with the international allies, achieved in 2019.
Now we move on to other topics. In Ecuador, Cotopaxi province, a landslide in the community of Yacuchaki destroyed 23 houses. The inhabitants of this community lived moments of terror and anguish after part of a mountain detached and buried 23 houses. Although no deaths or injuries were reported, the material losses were considerable. In addition, at least 1,500 people of 6 rural communities were isolated because of the landslide. The strong winter was affected the province of Cotopaxi for 10 days, where landslides and overflowing rivers caused damage to houses, roads, and other infrastructure. In the last 3 months of 2021, Spain recorded just 35% of the average rainfall it had seen during the same period from 1981 to 2010. While the arid zones of the Iberian Peninsula have historically experienced periods of drought, experts said climate change has exacerbated the problem. This year, amid record levels of low or no rainfall at all, farmers in Spain who are growing produce for all of Europe are worried that their crops for this season will be ruined. According to the National Weather Agency, only in 2005 has there been a January with almost no rain in this century. If clouds don't unleash in the next 2 weeks, emergency subsidies for farmers will be needed. While only 10% of the country has officially been declared under a prolonged drought, large areas, particularly in the south, face extreme shortages that could impact the irrigation of crops. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Despite Western allegations of an imminent Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russia-Belarus joint military drills partially concluded, according to Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu.
Part of them are completed. A part is ending. Some things need to be done, given the scale of the exercise that had been planned and started according to your instructions back in December.
And despite the U.S. calls about a mounting Russian presence in Ukraine borders, as well as an alleged imminent invasion, Russian citizens are calm and confident that there will not be a war with Ukraine, a nation they consider strongly bounded to Russia.
People in the West do not understand that we are one people, and we have 50% of relatives there and 50% here. If there is a war, it will be a civil war. Nobody wants a civil war. Therefore, this is a delusion.
I don't want there to be a war. I want us to live as before, peacefully and friendly, for all the people to be peaceful, calm, and never to fight again. They should think about the grandparents and grandmothers who fought in a war, who lived through it, so that there will be peace on earth.
In Paris, on Monday, the stock market plunged 3.3% amid crisis in Ukraine, plus systematic U.S. claims of an alleged Russian invasion of Kyiv. The fall was registered between 220 and 236 points, closing below 6,790 euros, in line with the stock market fall registered in other European Union nations, such as Germany, Spain and Italy. The Parisian market already suffered a drop of 1.27% on Friday due to concerns about inflation and the central bank's responses to it. This scenario worsened amidst the fears generated by Washington's accusations against Moscow of an alleged preparation by that country to carry out an invasion in Ukraine, claims that have been repeatedly rejected by the Russian authorities. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier was re-elected for a second term of 5 years by a special parliamentary assembly on Sunday. The president was re-elected with a big majority by a special assembly made up of the members of Parliament's lower house and representatives of Germany's 16 states. The re-elected president vowed that he will continue to work on strengthening democracy in Germany and help take away fears of the future, giving the country's citizens the confidence to handle the challenges ahead. Steinmeier also vowed to help heal wounds created by the coronavirus pandemic. Germany's president has little executive power, but is considered an important moral authority.
Pursuant to Article 54 of the German Constitution, whoever received the votes of the majority of the Federal Assembly, for example, whoever received at least 737 votes, shall be elected. I declare that Dr. Steinmeier has received the required majority of votes and is therefore elected President of the Federal Republic of Germany.
My responsibility is for all the people who live in our country, non-partisan, yes, but I am not neutral when it comes to the cause of democracy. Whoever fights for democracy will have me on his side. Whoever attacks it will have me as an opponent.
Farmers in central Greece on Sunday blocked a highway with tractors and poured cans of milk on the ground to protest against rising energy costs. Hundreds of tractors were parked on the major transport route outside the city of Larissa as part of the protest. The farmers were demanding the abolition of the electricity price adjustment clause, which the government said reflects changes in the price of oil and natural gas imports. Protesters were also calling for lower fuel taxes. Greek farmers said they are determined to shut down all the country's major highways if the government doesn't meet their demands. Voters in Switzerland on Sunday rejected a campaign that aimed to make it the first country to ban experiments on animals. People also voted to approve tougher restrictions on cigarette advertising. According to the government figures, 21% of voters were in favor of a ban on animal testing and 79% were against the measure. Polling stations for in-person voting opened for 2 hours, but most voters had already cast their ballots by post. The results of the referendum could have a significant impact on two of the country's major industries, the pharmaceutical sector and the tobacco giants that are headquartered in Switzerland. In Afghanistan, central bank officials expressed their rejection of plans by the U.S. to seize their frozen assets in New York. The bank recalled that the country's investments abroad are made in accordance with international practices and belong to the people of Afghanistan. In addition to not accepting such measures, the bank is calling for the decision to be reversed and for the return of Afghanistan's foreign currency, while calling the move to injustice to Afghans. The announcement comes after the United States Treasury Department announced on Friday that it plans to block at least $7 billion US from the Afghan as part of aid and pensions to September 11 victims. We'll take a final short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. On Sunday, a Palestinian youth was killed and 20 others were wounded by Israeli gunfire during a military operation by their occupying forces in northern West Bank. The events occur at midnight in the village of Silat al-Haritiya, near the city of Jenin. Palestinian Health Ministry confirmed that Muhammad Akram Abu Zalah, 17, died of head wounds caused by Israeli gunfire. Health authorities denounced occupation forces prevented ambulances from entering the locality to treat and transfer the wounded. The repressive episode took place after Israeli troops besieged the village, blocking all its accesses to a Palestinian citizen's house, which provoked a strong resistance from the population. According to local sources, the teenager's funeral will take place on Monday.
We thought there was a wedding because we saw lights. We asked, what's going on? And we were told there was a martyr. Who is the martyr? We didn't know. There was a martyr and there were wounded people. Then we found out through people on Facebook that the martyr was our son.
On Sunday, India's space agency launched an Earth observation satellite from the Satish Dhawan Space Center. Footage from the Indian organization showed the rocket's ignition and following flight before it disappeared into upper atmosphere. India launched its first space mission of 2022 to send a new Earth observation satellite to space alongside two smaller rider-shared satellites. A polar satellite launch vehicle built by the Indian Space Research Organization launched the Earth Observation Satellite 4, EOS-4, into orbit from a pad at the Satish Dhawan Space Center in Chiratikora off the Bay of Bengal. The mission's main satellite will observe Earth after a related satellite was lost during launch in 2021. In Tunisia, mobilizations began following the news that the president has issued a decree establishing a new provisional Supreme Council. The African country has seen a series of demonstrations in recent weeks against President Sayed, who in July 2021 dissolved the government and suspended parliament and gave himself greater powers. As hundreds of protesters took to the streets of the capital Tunis as part of a march organized by the country's largest political party, Ennahda, and civil society organization in rejection of President Kais Saied's recent measures. These decrees seek to replace the body he abolished and gave himself additional powers to control the country's main judicial organization.
Movement, the political and democratic movement of the street continues with the same objectives and the same approach. If we defend the republic and democracy, this can only be through democratic mechanisms. If President Sayed has positioned himself against the will of his people, while we remind him that it is necessary to resume a democratic process, the change will only be possible through the mobilization of people. The democratic
Now we move on to other topics. The most important border crossing between Canada and the United States, the Ambassador Bridge, was reopened after being inoperative for a week due to protests by truckers. On Sunday, according to the company that owns the facility, the reopening was possible thanks to the state of emergency declared in Ontario and an order issued by the judge on Friday. Meanwhile, Canadian police made around 30 arrests and seized 12 vehicles that were blocking traffic on Huron Church Road near the bridge. The so-called Freedom Caravan, a protest by hundreds of truckers who reject mandatory COVID-19 vaccination for cross-border travel, kept Ottawa and the main border crossing to the U.S. semi-paralyzed for days. According to Malaysia Health Ministry, the country recorded more than 22,000 new COVID-19 infections, bringing the national total to more than 3 million since the beginning of the pandemic. The daily increase of COVID-19 infections in the country has remained above 10,000 every day over the past week. The top health official in the Asian nation said the country has seen a wave of Omicron infections and called on elderly people to get their booster shots as soon as possible. The pandemic's basic reproduction number exceeded 1.50 in Malaysia, but the rates of severe condition, hospitalization and fatality remain low, and the pandemic remains controllable in the country. As of Friday, the death toll from COVID-19 had reached more than 32,000. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.